You know what changed after the pandemic? It wasn't that people couldn't leave their houses. It's that once they stopped going out, millions of them realized something disturbing. They never actually wanted to in the first place. They're your friend who always has a reason why tonight doesn't work. Your coworker who somehow turned 2 years of remote work into a permanent arrangement. The person who orders groceries online not for convenience, but to avoid 30 minutes in a fluorescent lit store. And here's what nobody tells you. This isn't agoraphobia. This isn't depression. This isn't even laziness. This is what happens when your nervous system finally admits that the outside world has always felt like too much. People who never want to leave the house didn't suddenly become this way. They were always this way. The world just used to force them to pretend otherwise. Picture this. You're 10 years old. Your parents insist you go to the birthday party. The one with 20 screaming kids, loud music, chaos everywhere. No quiet room to escape to. No permission to leave early. No adult who understands that this doesn't feel fun. It feels overwhelming. You endure it. Come home exhausted. And while every other kid is already asking about the next party, you're recovering like you just ran a marathon. By 15, you've learned to perform. You go out because that's what teenagers do. But there's always this countdown in your head, this awareness of how much energy you're burning, this relief when you finally get home, close the door, and can just stop. A study from the American Psychological Association found that post-2020, nearly 38% of adults report increased anxiety about leaving home for non-essential activities. But researchers noted that for many, this wasn't new anxiety. It was pre-existing discomfort that lockdowns finally gave permission to acknowledge. That's tens of millions of people who spent years forcing themselves into a world that never felt comfortable, and the moment they got permission to stop, they realized they didn't want to go back. That empty feeling when you have to leave the house, that's not laziness. That's your nervous system saying, why are we doing this again? That discomfort with the outside world did more than make them homebodies. It fundamentally changed what their brain registers as baseline safe. When most people think of home, they think of a place to sleep. When people who never want to leave think of home, they think of the only environment where every variable is controlled. The temperature, the lighting, the noise level, the people, the stimulation. Everything is predictable. Everything is regulated. And the moment they step outside, their brain shifts into what psychologists call environmental hypervigilance, where your nervous system treats uncontrolled environments as low-level threat situations. Not dangerous exactly, just expensive, cognitively, emotionally, physically expensive. Psychologically, this creates what researchers identify as sanctuary dependence, where home becomes not just a preference but a psychological necessity. Your brain learned that the outside world is unpredictable, overstimulating, and exhausting, and that home is the only place where you can fully let your guard down, which is why leaving the house, even for fun activities, feels like work. Research from environmental psychology shows that people with high sensory processing sensitivity report significantly lower stress hormones when in controlled, familiar environments. Their nervous system isn't broken. It's just calibrated differently. But here's the cost. Every invitation becomes a calculation. Every errand feels like a mission. And every time you do leave, you're already thinking about when you can get back. So yeah, psychologists might call it avoidance behavior or social withdrawal. But people who never want to leave the house, they just call it energy management. It's not that they're scared of the world. Exactly. It's more like they've done a cost-benefit analysis, and most of the time, leaving doesn't pass the test. Groceries delivered, worth the fee to avoid crowds, parking, fluorescent lights, small talk with the cashier, and carrying bags. Gym membership, unused, because the thought of working out in public, with people watching, with locker room chaos, makes exercise feel like punishment. They want to go out. They see other people enjoying brunches and concerts and spontaneous adventures. But when it's actually time to leave, their brain floods with resistance. And that's the big reason people misunderstand them. It's not about not having fun. It's about the fun not being worth the energy cost of getting there, being there, and recovering after. This isn't about being antisocial. It's about their nervous system treating out there and in here as fundamentally different threat levels. But here's what's fascinating. Despite never wanting to leave, these are often the same people who, when they absolutely have to, are completely capable. Job interview, they'll show up. Family emergency, they're out the door. Genuine obligation, no problem. They don't talk about how hard it was to make themselves leave. They don't post about it. They just do it. This capability was built through years of forcing themselves to function in a world that never felt natural. There's this weird paradox at the core of the homebody psychology. They're simultaneously the most resistant to leaving and the most reliable when it actually matters. They'll decline 20 casual invitations in a row, cancel plans at the last minute, ghost group chats about getting together. But when you actually need them, when something important is happening, they'll override every piece of resistance, show up, and be fully present. Because the issue was never capability. It was never caring about people. It was always just the massive energy differential between have to and supposed to. They'll skip the party, but show up to help you move. Decline the wedding, but visit you in the hospital. Say no to brunch, but yes to the hard conversation you need to have. This comes from a lifetime of rationing energy and spending it only where it truly counts. At work, they fought harder than anyone for remote options, not because they're lazy, their productivity numbers often prove the opposite, but because commuting, office politics, and open floor plans were draining them before the actual work even started. They're the ones who will work late, take on extra projects, do whatever it takes to keep that work from home arrangement, because to them, going back to an office isn't just inconvenient, it's a fundamental quality of life regression. In relationships, this creates a constant negotiation. Partners want to go out to dinner, they want to order in, partners want weekend trips, they want to stay home and actually rest. And the guilt is constant. Why don't you ever want to do anything? Feels like an accusation of not caring, when really, they just rather build a life that doesn't require constantly leaving their safe space. The relationships that work are with people who understand that staying in isn't rejecting adventure. It's choosing the kind of life that feels sustainable to them. And let's talk about money. They will pay almost anything to avoid leaving. Delivery fees that would make other people balk? Worth it. Premium for curbside pickup? Absolutely. Higher rent for location that requires fewer trips out? Investment. Other people see this as wasteful. They see it as the cost of maintaining their mental health. This comes from learning that peace has a price tag, and they're willing to pay it. And now, they're living in a post-pandemic world that's aggressively trying to return to normal. Employers mandating office returns, friends pressuring them to get out more, family asking if they're okay because they're always home. They had 2 years where staying home was virtuous, responsible, the right thing to do. And now that same behavior is being pathologized again. Because in the extroverted worldview, home is where you go when there's nowhere else to be. But for them, home is where they go because there's nowhere else they'd rather be. The truth is, people who never want to leave the house might be the early indicators of a world that's too loud, too fast, too much. They're not broken. They're just honest about what the rest of us are too busy to notice, that maybe we've built a society that requires too much of our nervous systems. People who never want to leave the house are turtles in a world that rewards rabbits, and you can't shame a turtle into being faster. You can only exhaust it trying. They're just there, in their shells, living at a pace that makes sense to them, expecting the world to eventually stop asking why. And maybe that's the most homebody thing of all, knowing that you're supposed to want to leave and choosing to stay anyway. If this hit home for you, literally, please subscribe. And if you want to support more psychology content like this, consider becoming a member. I would genuinely appreciate it.